Hello, welcome to Herd Immunity News again. Today I have the pleasure in talking with Mr. Ben Habib. Ben's a former MEP with the Brexit Party and he's now with the Reform Party. We're very interested to speak with you today because there's quite a lot going on in London right now, especially in relation to the ultra-low emission zones. London Mayor Sadiq Khans has basically claimed that around 4,000 people a year die from the findings from an Imperial College London report that's just come out. What are your thoughts on that report, please, Ben?
Well, it's an extraordinary report. Well, first of all, can I say, Marcus, what a pleasure it is to meet you. Thank you for coming to the office and to my office to interview me. On the subject, I find the report extraordinary. I don't know if you're aware, but TfL produces its own map of air quality in London. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
And it's a live map, so it's constantly tracking what the quality of air is. And if I remember correctly, the progressively more orange part of the map has worse air quality, and if it's green and heading towards blue, blue being the best bit, it's good air quality. And if you look at that map, and I've looked at it frequently, it almost always shows the outer boroughs of London to be perpetually blue. In fact, I've never known it not to be blue.
Right.
And the vast majority of London is either blue or green, and then there's a very small orange bit in the middle, and it is really very small. It might even be smaller than the congestion charge zone. And if you look at that map and you use that map to lead you, so this is a map produced by TfL, Sadiq Khans' own,
Yes.
own child, as it were. There is no justification for ULEZ because air quality is good. The other thing I do because I'm asthmatic,
Yes.
and so I look at the air quality in London every morning on my weather app, and it obviously locates where you are when it tells you what the air quality is. And air quality in London, by and large, is either 1 or 2 on the measurement, which is, very good or good. And so I don't know where he's getting these stats from. But of course, to say 4,000 people are going to die from, particulates in the atmosphere and bad air quality, it's a bit like the argument that 600,000 people are going to die from COVID unless we lock you up at home. It's almost impossible to push back at that because you immediately hit up into the moral correctitude of his position,
Yes.
the false moral correctitude of his position, that he's protecting lives. And of course, he's just making it up as he goes along, a bit like they were at Imperial College over COVID, frankly.
That's right, and it's funny you mentioned that, but the Chief Medical Officer, Sir Chris Whitty, has signed off on this, and he doesn't have the best of track records.
Yeah, well, again, very closely linked to COVID. Isn't it funny how the people who are obsessed about air, ostensibly, good air quality and COVID, and wanting to take draconian measures against the people in order to promote whatever it is they ostensibly fear, the same people.
Absolutely, and only a couple of days ago we had the revelation that £800,000 had been paid to the ICL. This was the Environmental Research Group. Now, doesn't that somewhat question the driving force behind
Absolutely.
this? Because subsequently, when the information came out and that Mr. Khan used in the recent court action that several counties fought against, now he will be able to raise £300 million in 223. What are your thoughts, Ben?
Well, I think it's appalling. So first of all, we've already established, I think, that there's no need for ULEZ because the air quality in London, at least the reasons that he gives, there's no reason for it. So I see it as nothing other than a smash and grab tax. And like so many of the taxes that are imposed on the people, it is a regressive tax. It hits the working and middle classes the hardest. It's the working and middle classes who have to use their cars, often for their small businesses or to get to their place of work. If they're part of the NHS, for example, which is a very substantial employer in London, and they're doing late night shifts, there's no public transport, they've got to use their car. If they're working at Heathrow, they're going to now get caught with this ULEZ charge. There's no easy way to get to Heathrow from many parts of London other than by car. If you're a white van driver and you want to make your deliveries, you're going to get caught by this effectively this tax. And the notion that you can scrap your car, is he offering £2,000 now to scrap your car?
Scheme, yes.
Yeah, so you get £2,000 to buy a 20,000. Sorry, you get £2,000 to buy a £20,000 electric car or £25,000 electric car. It's just unaffordable. This is nothing other than a smash and grab tax that hits the working and middle classes the hardest. Who, by the way, pick up the biggest burden of tax in this country already. And Sadiq Khans got form for it. So as we emerge from lockdown, instead of making tube fares cheaper, which is what you would expect him to do if he's so petrified about the quality of air in London, he actually raised tube fares. He's raised the fare on buses. He's raised council taxes. You know, he goes on about the broken economy created by the Tory party, of which he has some point. But over the last 2 years, even before inflation raised its ugly head, he was raising council taxes. All these taxes, all these charges, they hit the working and middle class. And the vast majority of people in London are working and middle class. They need their cars. They need the tube system to work. Their council taxes are just a further burden on top of the sudden increase in cost of heating their homes, and so on. The man is a menace to the very people he claims to represent. In other words, the working and middle classes.
Absolutely, a lot of people will go along with that. Now, to go a bit further, your candidate for London Mayor, Mr Harrow, he said that he would scrap ULEZ altogether. Would you support him in that?
Absolutely, and I would also scrap the congestion charge zone.
Yes. I mean, it seems crazy that you want to tax people higher and take more out of their bottom line profit to look for growth.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't tax your way to prosperity. This is something even the Tories don't understand. You know, when you look at Tory macroeconomic policies and management, the way they do it is through taxing and spending. It never occurs to them to cut tax. You know, when Jeremy Hunt wants to fix a problem, he says, well, I'll put more money into it. The other way to fix a problem is to reduce the burden of tax on people so they can decide how they spend their money. Who's the best decider? Who's the best decision maker for how your money should be spent? Do you think it's the government or do you think it's you? Do you think the government has a good track record in public expenditure? Or do you think the government wastes money hand over fist? It's the latter, isn't it? We all know it's the latter. Lord Agnew, I'm digressing, but Lord Agnew in, I think it was February 2022 or March 2022, resigned as a minister in the Treasury because of this massive waste of government spending. And so why there's this established notion, particularly on the left, people like Sadiq Khan, though it, as I say, it infects the Tories, this notion that there's somehow some moral correctitude in being taxed, paying your taxes, giving up your cash to the government in this mistaken belief that they're going to spend it well on your behalf. They're not. They're going to waste it. What they should be doing is scrapping ULEZ, scrapping the congestion charge, making it cheaper to use public transport. If they want people on the tubes and off their cars, make it cheaper for public transport. Make public transport work better. Don't put impediments in the way of the only alternative to a poor TfL. Improve TfL. It's a bit like their approach to education. I'm digressing, but I'm painting a picture. Yes. You know, instead of improving the state of improving state schooling, what they wish to do is tear down private education. Private education in this country actually works. Now, you may feel it's not fair for those who've gone through the state system not to have the same opportunities that those who've gone to private school, but that's a failing of the state system. It's not something that should move you to tear private schools down. That's not levelling up, that's levelling down. And that's the same with his approach to cars. Instead of incentivising people to give up their cars by having a fantastic London public transport system, he penalises car users. It's daft.
Yes, I mean, his leader, Sir Keir Starmer, actually suggested that these tradespeople could maybe take the underground with their ladders, maybe their concrete mixers. I mean, this is beyond...
I know, it's beyond belief. And, you know, at a very basic level, I like Boris biking around London, not because it's necessarily less carbon emissions, but because it's quick. Boris bike prices, the annual thing that I used to pay was 90 quid.
Right.
As we emerged from lockdown, Sadiq Khan increased it to 120. That's a 33% increase.
Yeah.
Does he want people on bikes or not? There's no joined up thinking here. And then the other thing you and I were discussing just before this, again, I'm slightly digressing, but I think it develops the point. The other thing you and I were discussing is that actually 20 miles an hour, which is now becoming the normal speed limit, cars are emitting much more particulates, much more in nitrous oxide, much more in carbon monoxide than they do when they're travelling at 30 or 40 miles an hour, which is a more optimum speed for a car. So, they're all over the place, aren't they, Marcus?
They absolutely, Ben. You've hit the nail on the head, and I would put it to you that this should maybe go back to the courts in light of all this new evidence that we have. We run a justice system here in this country. This will affect so many Londoners, but this will go throughout the whole of the UK, even though Labour are reeling back on it. Deputy Leader Angela Rayner really let this out the bag when on a Sky interview said the whole country will get this. Do you think if Labour get in, they will do this to the whole country?
I'm sure they will. Of course they will.
ULEZ Britain.
Of course they will. And that's the thin end of the wedge. They're going to bring in these 15-minute cities, about which I'm sure you're aware, where you can only visit through vehicular access a certain number of times your neighbouring 15-minute zone. I think in Oxford they're going to introduce 6 of these zones, and in order to visit a zone to which you're not within 15 minutes of, you've got to go out onto the ring road, come all the way around, and then drive back into that other 15-minute zone. Again, forcing people to use their cars more than they necessarily have to.
May I suggest, though, in Scotland it might be 7.5 minutes, because they always like to go a little bit further down the road of socialism, don't they? In Scotland, and Mr.
Hamza Yusuf.
Yeah, that's his name. Sorry. Yes, yes. Now, if I can just get you to move on, ULEZ. So let's scrap it all together. That's the Reform Party, from yourself right through. Everyone's behind that.
Yeah. You mentioned going back to court.
Yeah.
If Sadiq Khan has been producing false information in the court, actually it should more than just go back to court. There should be charges brought for misinformation being that is a criminal offence, I think.
And what shape or mannerism do you think that will actually take? Will somebody have to report him to the police?
I think someone would have to report him. Yeah, it does take, but a report would be sufficient for the police to investigate.
Well, in London right now, that's also a little bit of a problem, because we know from speaking to your fantastic candidate, Mr. Howard Cox, that 95% of crimes in London go unresolved, and 95% of the available police force are in the office. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I completely agree. So, on serious crime, only 7% of serious crime committed, so that's knife crime, serious, grievous bodily harm, that sort of thing, only 7% result in an arrest. Only half of those are charged, and then about 2/3 of those that are charged are convicted. That's a conviction rate of about 2 or 3% at most for serious crime. What they call low-level crime, having your car stolen or your house burgled, shoplifting, they don't even bother trying to punish that.
Right.
And of course, this isn't low-level crime. Even if the co-op, I think it was the co-op that was experiencing 1,000 burglaries a day. If they're experiencing 1,000 burglaries a day, the only way they can sustain their position is by increasing the cost of all their other products to make up for what they call leakage, these thefts. That means we're all paying for this low-level crime.
That's right.
And so we're paying for the police force, and then we're paying for the crime. Yeah. And, Sadiq Khan needs to get a grip of that too. But you're right. So you've got some suspicion that if someone made a complaint to the police about Sadiq Khan using false information in court, they probably wouldn't take action.
Well, we're just looking at we're looking at the current situation, the track record, and the trends right now is to shove these things or kick them into the long grass, as Nigel used to say when dealing with the EU. We are dealing with a Europhile here in Sadiq Khan. But if I can just take you on to a massive story that's happening right now, and I know you've got a lot of thoughts and a lot of views on this one. Recently, there was a picture put out in a PR campaign by All Living London, All One London. And it was a white mum, a white dad and 2 white children walking down along the Thames with the London Eye in the background.